Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Baum,
Go ahead.
Representatives Baum, Boyd, Camper, Capley, Chisholm, Cochran, Crawford, Faison. Freeman. Gant. Garrett. Grills. Hale. Hawk. Hicks of Washington. Hulsey. Lambert. Love. Miller. Moody. Parkinson. Reeves. Shaw. Sparks. Vaughn. Williams. Zachary. Vice Chairman Gillespie. Chairman Hicks of Hawkins.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for February the 11th, 2025. Members, please make sure that you are signed in at this time. And are there any personal orders before we begin? Let me say this, we are having some technical difficulties, so I do apologize for the little bit of a delay. Everyone should have a handout at their seat regarding the budget, which we are about to, and the presentation that we are about to be enlightened to. Okay, yeah, the handout. You need a hand. Okay, we'll get Representative Parkinson a handout if we could down front. But are there any other personal orders before we get started? All right, I see none. Well, today we will hear the budget overview by the Finance Administration, followed by 3 budget hearings. And so again, members, you can also refer to your dashboard for the presentation as well. So without objection, we will go out of session. We're out of session and we'll ask our presenters, please come forward. Commissioner, if you'll come up and introduce your staff. And the way we'll do this, we'll let you present a brief overview and then we'll open it up for questions. Members, if you have a question, please be making sure you turn around and get on the list if you would. And without further ado, Commissioner Bryson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here and congratulations on your role, and we're glad to see you here. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Jim Bryson, Commissioner of Finance and Administration, and I have with me today Director David Thurman, Director of the Budget Office, and Assistant Director Alex Schuman. So they are here to help me answer whatever questions that you may have. We are glad to be here today and have a few minutes to chat with you, and be glad to try to answer whatever questions that you may have. We do have a presentation that hopefully you will be able to see, and I think you also have in front of you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started while it's being pulled up. While that's being pulled up, a couple of things that I would really like to say, and the main thing is that I want to thank you for the long history of conservative leadership that you have provided to our budget. We are in the position we are in today, and I'm going to walk through some of that, but we are in the position we're in today because of the wise stewardship of our funds by the General Assembly over the last, long time, but particularly over the last 6 or 8 years. And so I want to thank you for that, and I will talk some about that as we get started. So let's go ahead and kind of move into it. I'll show you, here's an overview of our budget, and what we have there. There's an overview of our budget. You can see the arc of our budget. The chart shows that the budget over the last 5 years, in FY23 and 24, we saw significant growth in state revenues and federal revenues, increasing on into FY25. In FY26, we expect state revenues to grow slightly to $29 billion compared to $27 in FY25. We expect federal revenues to drop a little bit as COVID dollars and other federal programs come to an end. Because of this decline in federal funding, total revenues for the FY26 budget are expected to be slightly lower at approximately $58.4 billion. Though our overall FY26 budget will be slightly lower than FY25 or 24, the good news is that state tax revenues are now growing slightly. Also, the budget remains healthy because the administration and the General Assembly were wise enough to conserve funds in the high growth years and to provide a buffer for the slow growth years. We'll just look at tax growth itself, I think. Okay, so it looks like we're going to slide number 2 or the next. This one, I tell you, this one says tax growth is slowing at the top. All right, what this will show is that we have, until we get that back, I'll just give you the title of the slide as we go when we change it. The one that says tax growth is slowing at the top should show you several bars, several years. And what you see is significant growth in the FY20 to 22 range, and then it flattens out. And we have had not very much growth in the past few years in our tax revenue. Some of that is due to the fact that we have had some tax reductions in the past several years that have offset some of the natural growth that we might have had in our taxes. We do expect some growth in this year's taxes of about 2%, which is the rate set by the funding board back in November, and that will account for about $540 million of new recurring dollars. The next slide, which is called careful planning, I really wish you could see, but I will do my best to explain this one. Oh, that's right. You have the handout. Thank you. So this one's called careful planning. And what I want you to do is look at this one. This shows kind of why we are in the good position that we are in. During the high growth years, the COVID years, many states started programs started new programs and expanded existing ones. These states now find themselves in a financial crisis as now growth has slowed or sometimes stopped entirely. Not Tennessee. The primary reason is how we handled growth in recurring revenues during the high growth years. The Tennessee General Assembly stuck to a policy of smart planning and spending constraint during these years to put Tennessee in an enviable position as revenues later slowed and are now beginning to grow again. This chart shows recurring revenues in blue and recurring expenses in orange. Notice that our recurring revenues have consistently been higher over the past 4 years than recurring expenditures. The dollar difference between these two is displayed in the chart on the right. These recurring funds were spent on non-recurring one-time expenses such as capital or other one-time investments. When we spend recurring revenues on non-recurring expenses, those revenues are available to be used in the budget the following year. Here's how it has worked for us. Let me just kind of walk through the last few years on how this has worked and put us in a great position today. In FY23, we saw significant revenue growth. We elected to use $1.3 billion of recurring revenue for non-recurring expenses, the largest of which was the $1 billion we used to complete the TCAT master plan that year. These funds were then available again in FY24. In FY24, recurring revenues again grew substantially. We spent $2.6 billion of those recurring revenues on non-recurring expenses. This was the year we put $3.3 billion into our state and county roads. In FY25, growth slowed. Even so, we were able to put $973 million in recurring revenue for non-recurring expenses. As you remember, we used these funds to help address the F&E tax challenge that we faced last year. Since they were non-recurring, these funds are available to use again in the FY26 budget. In this FY26 budget, we plan to use $411 million of recurring revenue on non-recurring expenses that will be available for the FY27 budget that we will be working on a year from today. This practice of using recurring revenue for non-recurring expenses has smoothed out our budget and allowed us to make significant investments year after year. The next slide is entitled FY26 Budget Summary, General Fund. So let's talk broadly about where the money comes from and where the money is going for FY26. I want to give you just a sense of our available revenues and how we got there. The top line is $973 million of recurring funds that we spent on non-recurring revenues in the FY25 budget, the number we just talked about. Those funds are now available for FY26 budget. We add in the closing balances from FY24. We also sometimes call these budget reversions or departmental reversions, which ended on June 30th of this last year. This was an unusually large $1.5 billion. We added in our projected closing balance for the current year, FY25, of $578 million. That's for the current year projections. And finally, we add in the 2% estimated growth for FY26 at $540 million. Now, when you add all of those together, the total revenues available to spend are just north of $3.6 billion. We'll spend the rest of our time really talking about the expenditures that we are looking at for the budget. Before we get into that, though, I would like to touch on the special session revenues, our special session expenditures. If you look on that slide, this slide shows all of the FY25. Remember, we're in the FY25 budget right now. The FY25 expenditures for the disaster relief and education. The total is $495.5 million. Many people have asked, the most common question I get about this is, where did that money come from? Since we're already in this budget, this funds we've already been appropriated for this budget. Where did that money come from? Where it came from was the unusually large $1.5 billion balance that we saw on the previous page from FY24. Those funds were reverted back, and so we had the money in the bank, so to speak, to be able to use for the special session and you all could appropriate those funds in FY25. So that's where those funds came from. So we'll move forward and we'll go on past the budget highlights slide and go right into the slide that says the FY26 budget. We won't spend much time here except to reiterate that we are looking at a 2% tax revenue growth target as set by the funding board. This is a conservative estimate anticipating slow growth by historical standards. The budget uses recurring funds from the FY25 budget, as we were just talking about, to smooth out the budget and make key investments in core government services that serve our citizens now and far into the future. All right, let's go to the slide entitled Base Budget Reductions. I already mentioned how Tennessee has benefited from conservative fiscal management. This slide is a really great example. First, let's talk about budget reductions. Earlier in the budget process, each agency, each department reviewed their budget and offered a 1% budget reduction. This is a small but significant exercise because it forces review of existing budgets and expenditures for every program. I want to thank every department and agency for participating and contributing over $94 million in reductions that we can now plow back into our revenues for this year, for this budget. Second, we are reaping the benefits of the General Assembly's desire to catch up on our OPEB liabilities. The OPEB liabilities represent liabilities for the benefits that we have promised our state employees when they retire. A few years ago, the liabilities totaled several $100 million. So the General Assembly established a 20-year plan, putting $75 million a year into our recurring base budget to be able to pay off this liability. When the budget years and we had excess funds that we wanted to use in the high growth years, you all put hundreds of millions of dollars into the OPEB trust fund to be able to pay off those liabilities. The liabilities were paid off last year we recognized about $20 million in recurring savings because we no longer needed to spend the $75 million that we had put into the base budget to pay these liabilities. This year, we will recognize another $48 million of recurring savings. This is a really good example of the adage that good management pays dividends. Because of the budget reductions and the OPEB payoff, we are able to add another $142 million to our FY26 budget. Also, I want to just mention and have you notice that the agencies eliminated 324 long-term vacant positions for this budget also. And I want to thank the departments and the General Assembly for your hard work and your emphasis on making sure that we right-size our positions as often as possible. Matter of fact, the next slide called simply positions shows that the 324 vacant positions eliminated for FY26 are just the latest position reduction in this administration. Notice that even with significant increases in law enforcement positions, which we will talk about in a few minutes, we have eliminated a total of 466 long-term vacant positions over the past 6 years. Now let's look at how we've invested those funds. The first slide here shows the history of our BEP and TISA funding. One of the most important investments we make is in educating our children. This year, we will spend nearly $7 billion on K through 12 local public schools through the TISA. This is through the TISA formula. The funding includes a 2.8% increase per year, which is 50% higher than what we expect our growth rate, our tax revenue growth rate to be. in the state. In total, TISA funding has grown by over $2 billion per year since FY19, and this is a 45% increase just since FY19. The amount going into TISA this year is $164 million, and you'll see that number again on this next slide. The next slide is simply called K through 12 education. Though TISA funding has increased significantly, is only really a fraction of the proposed funding that you all are looking at putting in K through 12 public education. TISA related funding going to schools will actually grow by $244 million. In addition to the $164 million I mentioned a moment ago, we will add $80 million from last year. This is every year. Let me explain where this comes from. Every year, the budget office estimates the number of children that we're going to have in our schools, because TISA is paid to by individual pupils. We estimated that last year, and we estimated high. Therefore, we overfunded TISA last year because we funded it for the students we thought they were going to be, and when the final numbers came in, it was lower. So we had $80 million that is there from last year that we're going to add to this year's budget and add it to our TISA formula, which raises our $164 million to $244 million. So that's where we get the $244 million. In addition, we propose funding to continue the summer learning program, the Fast Growth Fund, while making an additional $5 million in the School Facilities Fund. Now, I also want to talk for just a moment about special session here. A moment ago, we talked about special session, and those were the appropriations that you made for FY25. You also made significant appropriations in the special session for FY26, and those are here on this slide. The teacher bonuses, facilities funding, and grade A schools grants passed in the special session added another $278.1 million to state funding for our local K through 12 public schools. And so in total, the funding this year in FY26 for K-12 public schools comes to $579.3 million, a very significant year for making investments into our public education system. The next slide is higher education. I'm just going to really talk briefly about this. Higher education is also receiving a significant investment. We propose total funding for higher education be increased by $780 million. This includes funding for salaries, benefits, and the outcomes-based funding formula, among other higher ed initiatives. This budget includes $649 million for higher ed capital, and we're going to walk through some of those projects in a few minutes in a little bit more detail. Next, we're going to talk about public safety, particularly troopers that we put on the road. Keeping our citizens safe has always been and remains a top priority. Each of the past 5 years, we have increased the number of troopers on the road. This year, we will add an additional 100 troopers, bringing us to a total of 372 new troopers added over the past 5 years. We now have over 1,000 troopers on the road and responding to emergencies to keep our citizens safe from one end of the state to the other. We have similarly on the next slide, we will show you increases in TBI funding. TBI is significantly stronger than it was a few years ago. This year, we will add 22 new positions for a total of 235 positions added since FY19. We will now have a grand total of 788 TBI professionals helping to keep our state safe. While we're talking about roads, let's talk about Tennessee's road systems on the slide called Road Investments. As Tennesseans, we've always been proud of our roads, and for good reasons. Yet many of them were built 50 to 70 years ago, and many of the roads and bridges are at or nearing the end of their design life. Today, TDOT estimates Tennessee has a $30 billion in outstanding needs on our roads and bridges. 2 years ago, we made an unprecedented $3 billion investment in our roads from the general fund. It was historic, but it was only a first step toward making up the road maintenance deficit in our state. As we consider our state's future, we must continue to invest in the infrastructure in which future growth will depend. Therefore, we propose another $1 billion investment in our state road fund. This is a good step forward, but we should go further to ensure that we continue to invest in our roads for the years and the decades to come. This budget supports legislation to redirect state revenue on the tire sales from the general fund to the transportation fund. This would result in an $80 million recurring investment as a future commitment to maintaining Tennessee's excellent road system. We cannot catch up on all of our infrastructure needs at once, but we can face the problem head on and find solutions that will serve our state for decades to come. In addition to roads, airports are extraordinarily important in our state. Like roads, they are a key driver of economic activity and growth. Commercial airports bring tourists and businesses and have a tremendous economic impact. Therefore, we propose continuing our commitment by investing $34.5 million in our commercial airports. Our total state investment in commercial airports will be over $94 million this year. Tennessee has 77 general aviation airports that serve as a portal to the world for many of our rural communities. We have committed to maintain an annual fund of $50 million for capital and maintenance. That commitment continues in this budget as the state will provide $24.7 million for our general aviation airports to supplement the federal funding that they also receive. I want to talk for a moment about nuclear investment on the next slide. You heard the governor talk some about this last night. Energy is a key to growth, and Tennessee has always been a leader in energy with TVA and other energy providers. A couple of years ago, the administration and the General Assembly partnered to focus on attracting advanced nuclear technology companies to Tennessee. This initiative was extremely successful, attracting several companies and the largest single investment in Tennessee history. Tennessee will remain at the forefront. This budget bolsters the Nuclear Energy Initiative grants by another $10 million. We are also earmarking $50 million toward TVA's effort to build a small nuclear reactor on the Clinch River. Tennessee will lead the nation also by establishing the very first nuclear fusion regulatory framework. This will attract nuclear investment while ensuring public health and safety. Also, Tennessee's nuclear task force that we set up a few years ago recommended investing in workforce nuclear education. This budget recommends $10 million of GIVE grants to go to higher education to educate our workforce on nuclear issues so that we're ready when these companies come. We'll also talk about conservation initiatives. Most everyone agrees that Tennessee has a special outdoor heritage that is unique to our state compared to many other states. An example of that is our family farms. Our farmland is disappearing at an alarming rate. So this budget sets aside $25 million for Farmland Conservation Fund to ensure farmland is preserved for future generations. After all, agriculture is Tennessee's #1 industry, and it is at the top of Tennessee's seal that is situated right behind you. This budget proposes recurring investments in the Agriculture Enterprise Fund and the Ag Enhancement Fund to cement this investment in our base budget as a priority for the future. For those who do not make their living off the land, state parks are often their window to the outdoors. We continue to invest in our state parks to grow that system from 56 a few years ago to 70 state parks across the state, from Warriors Path in Kingsport to T.O. Fuller in Memphis. This year, we also learned a lot about the challenges of the Duck River, the most biologically diverse river in the nation. It must be preserved. Also, smart use of our water is crucial to quality of life and economic growth. The Duck River is both a Tennessee treasure and a key to growth in one of the fastest growing regions of our state. Therefore, we propose $24.5 million to develop comprehensive plans for water use, preservation, habitat protection, and river management of the Duck River. Furthermore, the Duck River will also serve as a model for how we will steward similar watersheds all across this state for the future. And finally, we are investing $100 million in seed money for a water distribution plan to bring water to the Duck River watershed specifically to serve this fast-growing region and to take pressure off of the Duck River, because it is currently the only source of water for that region, and eventually we will need water from somewhere else. So we are proposing that we get that started now. Let's talk for just a moment about capital. The capital outlay slide shows that we are proposing nearly $1.4 billion in capital items. The three state buildings being proposed are all projects that have been discussed for the past several years, and it's time to get them done. We need to provide for the safety and care of some of our most challenged children. The Woodland Hills and Wilder facilities are desperately needed and deserve this investment. Also, the recent disasters in East Tennessee have shown the importance of a fast and effective disaster response. We don't know when or where a disaster will strike or whose district will be affected, but we do know that it will happen. Our team is extraordinary, but they need the best equipment and the best facilities to perform their best. This budget includes a new emergency operations center to ensure that our citizens have the fastest and most effective response when their lives are most in danger. And several years ago, we moved the library and archives to a beautiful new building with the intent to renovate the old building for judicial use. This budget follows through on that plan to create a single facility for judicial use and the Supreme Court. The capital budget also includes about $600 million for higher education, specifically for the projects that you see on this slide. Also, we have budgeted nearly $200 million for maintaining all of our buildings across the state, keep them in good shape so that they do not need capital replacement in the near future. You will notice that the projects with the asterisks next to them, these are the projects that we propose bonding as leverage to complete them at a lower cost. Some of these projects have been on the capital projects list for a long time, and their costs have been raised upwards several times. We can use leverage to move them along and reduce the ultimate cost of building them. Since this strategy has not appeared in the past few budgets, let me spend a couple of minutes outlining it. Debt among AAA states is the next slide. One concern about debt is always about protecting our AAA rating. For good reason, we are exceedingly proud of our AAA rating by all three of the major bond rating agencies. We have maintained this rating for many years, and as we have paid off debt and resisted adding more debt, we must and we will maintain our AAA rating. Even so, other states have used debt to their advantage while maintaining that very same AAA rating. There are 15 AAA states as shown on this table. All of them have a higher debt load than Tennessee. Delaware's debt is 12 times Tennessee's debt as a percentage of GDP. Florida's debt is 2.5 times our debt load, and Texas is twice our debt load. Tennessee is an extremely low debt state. However, this table clearly shows that our extraordinarily low debt level is not required to maintain a AAA debt rating. Debt is simply a financial tool. Debt is called leverage because it can be used to provide an advantage for Tennessee and its citizens. In the past few years, we've experienced significant growth in construction costs. Frankly, costs are rising much faster than interest rates. The states can incur debt at a relatively low interest rate while construction costs rise 10% or more annually. Additionally, there is often a real cost to not having space for our state services available, along with the opportunity cost of having inadequate facilities. Moderate debt can be used to effectively provide the facilities our citizens need and at a lower cost than waiting until the state accumulates the cash. We saw from this comparison, moderate debt will not endanger our excellent credit rating. Let's go to the debt policy slide. Debt must be used wisely with effective guardrails. Fortunately, the Funding Board has already developed a debt management policy, the latest version of which was adopted this past July. We affirm the wisdom of that policy and the desire to follow it. We also affirm the Funding Board's policy that debt service should not exceed 6% of state tax revenues. Finally, we propose that the comptroller conduct a debt capacity study each year that Tennessee issues new debt. This will ensure that all decision makers are able to monitor and moderate Tennessee's outstanding debt. Let's go to the slide called bonds and debt service. Bonding the capital investments I showed you a moment ago would total $930 million in total debt, resulting in $87.5 million in new debt service for the general fund and $9.2 million for the Facilities Revolving Fund, often called FERF. When expiring debt service is netted out, the total increase in debt service will be $61.7 million. Obviously, that is debt service we can handle in our budget, but we must look at how it compares to the maximum debt service policy as prescribed by the Funding Board, and that is on the next slide, titled Debt Service as a Percent of Taxes. The Funding Board policy recommends that total debt service remain below 6% of total state tax revenues. Note that 6 years ago, total debt service was 2.4% of state tax revenue. We have consistently reduced that amount over the past few years so that total debt service today is 1.3% of total tax revenue. If we add the proposed projects, debt service will increase by 0.39% to 1.75% of total tax revenues, well below the 6% policy guidance and significantly below the level when the Lee administration assumed office. The debt being proposed today is prudent and reasonable. Incurring this debt will help our state operations to provide service to our citizens and help higher education with some of the most needed capital projects. The state gains advantages in a prudent and careful manner that does not put our funding at risk. And finally, no budget presentation is complete without a discussion of the Rainy Day Fund. We propose making another $35 million investment to the savings account. The fund balance is now nearly $2.2 billion, 150% higher than it was in FY19 and significantly above the statutory goal of 8% of revenues. Our actual balance is closer to 10% of revenues, where, as we said, our statutory goal is 8%. So we are in good shape on the Rainy Day Fund. A couple of things I want to point out here. Not only is it $2.2 billion, but I want to really thank the General Assembly, because we talked some in the early part of this presentation about the ups and downs of our economy and the ups and downs of our budget and the way we could do our budget. But you notice on this chart, there hasn't in recent years been a down in our Rainy Day Fund. The General Assembly has always seen fit to invest in our Rainy Day Fund, and that is a smart fiscal policy that I want to commend you for and thank you for. And so we propose another $35 million this year to put us close to $2.2 billion. Finally, I just want to say I've simply highlighted some of the key components of our FY26 budget. As you know, as you review the budget details, you will find many other investments that are necessary and important to our state. You have the budget book before you, so you can look through that. This budget makes investments in services that are core functions of government and better meet the needs of our citizens. Yet we have also invested in our state's future, economic growth balanced with preserving our Tennessee heritage, balanced with serving our citizens. A primary reason for Tennessee's success is its conservative fiscal approach. It has smoothed out both our ups and our downs. It provides us with the bandwidth to invest in core government services every year. Our conservative fiscal approach keeps Tennessee financially strong, able to serve our customers, and invest in our state's future. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We look forward to answering whatever questions that you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Bryson, and members. You've heard the presentation. We're now going to open the floor up for any questions or discussion, and we are going to begin with Chairman Baum. Chairman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Hicks. I've got two questions. The first one's on TCRS and the second one's on bonds. The last several years, we have moved several $100 million to TCRS so that it'll be fully funded and we won't have any future unfunded liability. I didn't hear anything about that this year, and it may be because investments have done well. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, just as a barometer of the market, is up about 25%. So I guess I'm wondering, where does our funding level with TCRS stand right now? It may be that it's over 100% funded.
Yeah, do you know? You have that? You can go ahead and answer it if you want. There you go. Yeah,
This is working.
you're on. Yeah, you're on.
Okay. All right. So I can't tell you the percentage. That'd be a question for the treasurer, but I can tell you. they do
Director,
an-
if you would, just
Oh.
state your name if you don't care,
Dave
just for the
Thurman,
record.
Director
Thank
of the
you.
Budget Office. I can tell you each year they do an actuarial study, and based on that study, they adjust their contribution rates, and we help to fund that as a cost increase. And based on the most recent study, there is no increase to the contribution rates required. So I'm assuming the actuarial study showed that we are in a really good place.
Chairman Bond?
It's either fully funded or more than fully funded. And my second question has to do with bonds. I've noticed most of the proposed bonded debt is for projects in higher education. Have you all considered whether there'd be any advantage or disadvantage to letting the institutions of higher education issue the bonds and maybe even go a step further and giving them the flexibility to decide whether to issue bonds to build capital structures?
Am I on? Yes, it's a good question, and it's one that we have been talking about. There has been a proposal that we do give them some flexibility to be able to issue their own bonds, and so we are working with that. The proposal today would be that it go through the Tennessee State School Bond Authority. Right now, the School Bond Authority only bonds what they call auxiliary buildings, like those are dorms and other revenue producing facilities, but we are working with them to talk about how we might give institutions of higher education an opportunity to go to do their educational space as well and use their tuition and state appropriations and fees to be able to cover those bond service payments, those debt service payments. So yes, we are working on that, and I would anticipate there would be some movement on that over the next few months.
Okay. Thank you. Chairman Bond.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Gillespie.
There we go. Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. First, before I get to my question, you touched on added funds for troopers and Highway Patrol and TBI. And just on behalf of Memphis, thank you for that. With that said, wonderful work there with the Office of Criminal Justice Programs, which you did not really cover here. So I hope it's okay for me to ask this question. It's been brought to my attention that there's going to be a decrease of funding for the sexual assault centers and victim services providers across the state. I was just curious if you could touch on that or if we could talk about that a little bit.
We're talking, I don't know of a decrease in funding. We're not aware of that. Do you have a reference by any chance?
I did.
And we'll be glad,
I'll get with you after.
Representative, we'll be glad to talk to you one-on-one about that if you'd
Okay.
like.
Thank
Yep.
you.
We're going to go to Representative Freeman. Did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I do. And the decrease is in the perpetual decrease in VOCA funding coming from federal dollars that funds these services. And as I've talked to the committee and the body before, rape and sexual abuse is one of the only crimes that we ask the victims to pay for themselves. If you were the victim of a car robbery or stabbing or shooting, you would not ask that victim to pay for the testing like we do for rape kits. And what the Vice Chairman was talking about is the VOCA dollars declining in the state. I don't see in the budget where the state's picking up that balance.
So I'll say, I think there's a little bit of a movement of the money, I believe. So the VOCA is a federal program that is declining. And we've known that for a while. We do have in here an increase in the VCIF funding. That's a victims fund for crime. So I think that's going to help in that area. That's the one thing I know about. There may be more that we can bring to your attention. Is there anything else? That's the one thing that I know about. There is a significant increase in VCIF that will address some of those issues, I believe.
Representative Freeman. All right, Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Commissioner and team. I appreciate the hard work you guys have done and all the meetings leading up to. I love watching budget presentations on the live stream. Just kidding, of course. I did
We wondered who that person was.
Right, issuing, yeah, it's me. You can see it on there, but the bond issuance is not something that's necessarily new to us. It has been a lot less frequent in the last several years, which I'm thankful for. But if you could help me understand a little bit better as it relates to the bond, obviously we're in really good shape to issue bonds, which is why we're doing that. I guess the question I have is why we're going to the well to issue bonds and we have so much room. Can you tell us how you determine, the total of bonds? Because albeit we're spending a lot of resources and capital projects for higher ed. There's also the Emergency Operations Center for TEMA. And so why $1 billion or 963 million instead of 1.5? Or could you help me understand that a little bit better?
It really comes down to wanting to take, we haven't done this in a while. This isn't new to state government by any means. It just hasn't been done in a while.
Mhm.
And so we really wanted to just we wanted to be moderate and careful about our bonding. We want to make sure that we do this in a measured and smart approach. And so we didn't want to take big bites out of it. It's smart, I think, to start small and see where you go from there. And so there were some projects that were important, particularly those 3 state projects that I mentioned that have been on the books for a while that we've talked about almost every year and we haven't done. And so we decided that we looked at the higher ed projects that were high on the list that needed to be done. And so we thought we just need to put together a moderate package that we can have these discussions about and then see where we go from here. But we felt like this was enough for this year, to be honest.
And I really appreciate the suggestion. The thought is if we were going to the well to issue bonds, and I'm in favor of doing that this year and have been in favor of doing that the years in which we decided to do it, because financially it was the right thing to do. I think in this case it also is. But if the legislature decided that they wanted to issue additional bonds, that might be something we would talk about for maybe 1 or 2 more projects. But do you think another $100 million or $200 million would move the needle as it relates to risk, as it relates to how you studied these?
Well, you can go back and look at the chart that I showed that showed that what we're doing now raises our percentage by about 0.39 or 0.36? Yeah, 0.39%. So
Just okay.
you could add some more, and we most likely have the capacity to add some more. The only caution that I would make is that we specifically wanted to be moderate and kind of get our feet into this and kind of get back into it before we went too big.
Right. Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I do think it's important for us to do it, but just issuing bonds and setting them up, there's an expense associated with that. And sometimes it's better to do it every other or third year than it is to do it every year for the set those up. But I want to go to education spending a little bit. I know we've had a special session. There's been a lot of discussion about it. Your graphs are amazing, but they are confusing to me sometimes. And so I just wanted to clarify for TISA funding for this year, the TISA base rate per pupil was $7,075. And that's factored into this number. And the base rate per pupil, if I did the math on my phone, I think it's going to be somewhere around $7,288 thereabout for the base funding. Is that correct?
It'll be close to that. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. It'll be in the appropriations bill. We'll have more specific funding
Okay.
numbers.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing that. I did notice in the large paperweight you had delivered to our office yesterday that on B25 and B26, whenever we talk about Team Act and non-Team Act employees, a lot of times we talk about, and quite frankly, in addition to teachers this year, obviously this legislature and you have made a commitment to try to increase base teacher pay over a period of time to get to 50,000. As it relates to education, public education, we're including that continuation in this budget.
And thank you, Representative Chairman. That's a very good point. I should have mentioned that. The teacher pay is included in the TISA recommendation. We are on track to get to the $50,000 starting pay for teachers in Tennessee I believe, finish that next year.
Okay.
Right.
And back to the TMAC and non-TMAC employees, typically when we have discussions like this, you tell us, well, we're going to raise TMAC employees X or percent, and then non-TMAC employees X percent as well. Do you have any idea what those percentages are?
It's 2.6% across the board.
Okay. All right. I've got some more, but I'm going to let somebody else ask a question, Chairman.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Next on the list is Representative Gant. And just to make this a lot easier, once you're recognized, I'll just let you have the dialogue back and forth. And of course, if it runs on, I may stop you. But until then, once you're recognized, you just go ahead and have that. Yep, Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the transportation infrastructure roads, you had mentioned 1 billion additional dollars, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is any of that money going toward the expansion of our interstate systems, especially Interstate 40, to begin a process of going from 2 lanes to 3 lanes? Is there any discussion on solidifying that plan?
So to my knowledge, this is going toward the backlog of projects that we have, and I don't know that there is any earmarking of these funds to go toward any particular project.
So in this budget, there is no money for the expansion of Interstate 40 to go to 3 lanes.
I don't know. There's another $1 billion in this budget to go toward the projects that are on the plan. I don't know where on the plan that is, so I can't answer that question directly.
Okay. Second question, if I can, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned the Wilder Youth Development Center, and I know at one time we had talked about building a new facility there. And I caught the tail end of what you were talking about with that facility. Can you summarize what we're doing with that facility as far as appropriating money for that new facility? Is that still part of the governor's overall plan in tearing that facility down and building a new facility there on site or somewhere else?
This is to renovate the one we have. Okay, I believe it is. We are talking about that. I believe it is to build a new one, and where exactly, I don't remember offhand, but I can get you that. I'll get you that.
Because I know that we've been talking about this for now going on
That's right.
4, maybe 5 years.
Mhm.
And my constituents are continually asking me the question of where we're at on that. And at one point, we announced with the local county mayor that we were going to rebuild that facility. And here we are 5 years later, and we're still talking about doing that. So you can kind of imagine what that makes me look like as their representative, promising a project that we're not, proceeding on. So if you were in my shoes, how would you explain that?
It's been a project that we have, as you said, it's been on the books for a while, and it kind of goes with the other projects that I mentioned that have been on the books. So the prices keep rising and construction costs keep going up. And so it's time that we come back and we bond these projects and get started and do it. We need to get that facility done, and this is a budget that will make it happen.
Okay, so is there a start date of when we're going to solidify this and move forward?
I don't have that, but I'll be glad to get with you and get somebody to talk to you that has a lot more information than I do about the specifics of the actual project.
Okay, all right. And thank you for you and your team. And I tell you, y'all are very talented in your presentation. And I could not begin to do the process of what y'all are doing here today. So thank you for your time and your efforts in what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gant. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for your presentation. On your slides, page 12, education, where you list the FY26 new funding, 164 million.
Yes.
How much of that 164 in TISA funding is for the TISA base funding and any component adjustments? And then how much is for salaries, how much for benefits, retirement, et cetera? Can you break that out for us? Or do I need to talk to Education Department about that?
we don't have that information. We get that we get the per pupil funding from education, and then we go forward with, and actually building the budget around that.
So you're saying continue, Mr. Chairman, right?
Yes, please
Okay.
do.
So, looking at it, to me, it's just a lump sum of this 164 million, which appears to be about 100 million less than the current year. So that's kind of why I was wondering, did this include just the base funding, or is this with pensions and all of these other things just lumped into this one sum?
Okay, this is this 164 million is actually an increase in funding
Okay,
across the state. And so it's 106, so the TISA formula will receive $164 million in this budget of additional funding over and above the funding that was set last year.
okay, that answers that question. Okay, thank you. Also on that same page at the bottom with the sports wagering, during a special session, we dealt with taking a portion of that sports wagering to help with what's going on with the voucher legislation. And, people are concerned about the status of the lottery funds for higher education. Can you talk to what you believe the impact would be on that, or this unreadiness people have, being worried about lottery is already on a decline, and there was hope that with the sports wagering that it would offset that and we can move forward more, higher education scholarships and so on. Now we're at this point. Could you talk to us about how you feel about the status of the lottery funding?
Yeah, our priority is that the Hope Scholarship not decline, and that it stay at least what it is today. We are monitoring the lottery dollars and what those look like. We get a presentation from the lottery on a regular basis, and we will be looking into that in more detail even in the next few weeks before the amendment comes out. We'll be looking at the lottery dollars more closely.
I appreciate that, because one of the things that I would say concerned me during the special session is that we really didn't hear from you on the budget and the implications that it was going to have on the current year. So that's kind of why I was trying to get this clear in my head about that. I appreciate your answer. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, on page 16, where we're talking about the road investments. Now, I appreciate everything TDOT is doing, and they're doing a wonderful job, awesome job. I mean, we get all kind of, awards for what we're doing. That's a fact, and we all appreciate it. But what I'm concerned about is what is the solution, I should say, for the highway funding? Because you're saying here, we already have 30 billion just outstanding, and we passed the Improve Act, and last year we did the Modernization Act, and we all want to do these things, but there's still a list of projects that is 30 billion, and we're taking the 1 billion and the 80 million. Great, we need to do that, but that's non-recurring money to go to these projects, and I'm wondering, what do you see as a long-term solution for the highway funding, with the federal being on again, off again? Can you give us some insight, from your perspective?
I believe that there are two big issues with a long-term success of the road funding. One is a lot of what you all did a couple of years ago with the Transportation Modernization Act, and that you changed the way that we go about funding and managing our roads. So now we are able to begin projects faster and get them done faster, and we don't have a lot of different projects out there that are all in different stages of completion and are all taking 10 years to do. We're rolling through them faster so we can move from one to the other. And that's part of the issue, is making sure that we have the kinds of procurement and the kinds of project management processes that allow us to build these roads cheaper and faster. So that's one piece, and we'll continue to work on that. I think the other piece is the funding, which is what you're really addressing. And there are $30 billion of funding that needs to be made. If we had $30 billion to put in it today, We could address all that, but we don't. And so we have to figure out what that looks like. The first step in that process, and it's not a solution, but one step in that process is the $80 million that we are proposing be taken from tire sales, the sales tax on tires, and redirected from the general fund into the transportation fund. That will be recurring
On a recurring
dollars
basis, okay.
every year
Mhm.
that also over time should grow. And so it'll get a little bit bigger every year. And so it'll help. It's not the solution, but it is a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Later. Deputy Speaker Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you to you and your team for your presentation. A couple of questions. One, specifically related to Duck River. This has been a hot topic over the last couple of years. As an East Tennessee guy, I'm not sure I fully understand the scope of the project. So my question is, you had mentioned specifically that the 125 million was seed money. Can you speak to the total cost of the project, and if do we have the commitments for the project, and if what this seed money does to move that project forward?
Sure. Let me first clarify what I said, and that is that what I meant to convey is that there's $24.5 million is actually for planning around the Duck River and to make sure that that river has all the plans for preserving its habitat and its waterway and all of those things. That's 24. There's another 100 million that's a different bucket, and that is to as seed money for pretty expensive, probably I'm going to guess close to $1 billion cost for a water line that would probably come from the Cumberland or the Tennessee River that would come down to serve that central area in central southern Tennessee area, because as it continues to grow, it needs a better source of water. And as it continues to grow, if it continues to take off the duck, not only is the Duck River going to go down and we're going to lose that habitat, but we're also going to not be able to serve that community. So we need to be able to solve that problem. The $100 million is seed money to get other investors in to be able to make that pipeline, and it will only be used if that happens.
So are there any Mr. Chairman?
No, you're recognized. Please go
Thank you. Do we already have additional commitments for that?
There's a plan out there to do it, but I don't believe there are commitments on paper.
Okay. And then last one, Mr. Chairman, I have a concern about the listing for the aquariums, because I've carried the budget amendment for them for years. And typically we do $1 million to each one. I'm sorry, I said the aquariums, the zoo. We typically do $1 million for each zoo. And in this budget, there is there's $40 million total, with $20 million appropriation, both the Memphis and the Nashville Zoo. And so why was this not more of a bucket and evenly distributed but among the zoos? And really importantly, why wasn't Knoxville included in that?
Why was it not what?
Why was the Knoxville Zoo not included?
Yeah, I think these were just requests. There were two big, major, large capital projects at each of those locations where we got requests to help with the capital. And I know at least on one of them, there was a promise of a large matching kind of donation. And so we made the decision that these were the types of family-friendly types of assets that we wanted in our state. And there was a request to help them with their capital, and there was a matching request along with it, and we made the decision to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. Thank you for your presentation. Looking at the TISA investment in student growth allocation of $244 million, and if you can just have it sent to my office, just want to know what percentage or amounts of that 244 is going to be teacher salaries.
Yeah, that's similar to the question that we were just asked, and we don't know that. The Department of Education would have that.
Right.
We get a per pupil funding number from them, and we budget to that. And so we don't have that information with us.
Okay. So I got to go to the department bid, I guess.
I think so. That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
We'll be glad to help with that, Representative.
If you could, because I'm not on education this year.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be glad to help you get those numbers and as best we can.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Representative Capley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, gentlemen. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My question is about the Textbook Commission, and members, if you want to follow along, it's B111. Multi-layered question here. The actual for 2023, 2024 in payroll for 3 full-time positions was 60,300, and their operational expenses were 2,300. And the recommended for 2025, 2026 is 400,600 and 500,000 in operational expenses. Could you walk us through what those 3 positions are? And then after that, I have a few more.
Well, I'm going to ask Director Thurman to do that. That's been something a problem that we've been working through to solve for the Textbook Commission.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you. And I'm impressed you found that one because it was kind of buried in here. But so the issue came to us with from the Textbook Commission where there was, I think, in the appropriation bill, some money that was earmarked from education to when they separated the textbook out of the department as a standalone entity, and then also provided some positions. Education was already doing some textbook work, but when we moved the money over, we moved it over into the wrong place. And so that's why you're seeing an up and a down in the 2 different fiscal years. And so what we determined is that the money that was in education, this is a little long story, I'm sorry, that was in education was in a non-people expenditure. And we moved it into a people cost. And so we put the money back where it needed to be and then gave a cost increase to reflect to fully fund the positions that they have. We kind of determined that the positions that they had were not fully funded. So that's kind of the different adjustments that we're making, is trying to reset their budget, as Commissioner said, and that means we have to fully fund their staffing.
Okay, and I guess my next question is, what exactly do they do? What do the 3 people do? Because I know there's 11 members on the board, but those are not paid members. So we've got 3 members that are being paid, again, $400,600, $133,000 apiece. What are they doing?
Yeah, well, so it is salaries, but also includes benefits.
Okay.
So it's a part of it.
Okay.
So just know that. I can't tell you everything that they do, but I know that they're involved in the review of and approval of certain, materials and textbooks for folks. So they do a lot of that with, I guess, the membership, the board members, and then they also outsource some of that with below the line cost.
Okay, and then could you speak a little bit on the operational expenses, why they need $500,000 in operational expenses?
So that's about what they were spending prior to when they were embedded in the Department of Education. So that's not a new expense. It's just, again, part of the resetting, putting the money in the right place to reflect how they were operating prior to.
Okay. I'll follow up. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the conservation initiatives. Are any of those dollars going straight to farmer, or are they going to an entity then to the farmers?
Okay, you're talking about the Farmland Conservation Fund, or are you talking about the ag funds?
Let's go with the conservation fund first.
Okay, that's actually a bill that's in the General Assembly to actually give farmers some help when they want to set aside a conservation easement for their farm and have it be farmland forever. It gets set aside as an easement farmland forever. So, and your question, I'm sorry, and I've got to talking and forgot what your question was.
Well, do those funds go straight to the farmer themselves?
Yeah, those would go to the farmers for that. Yeah. And actually I think it's the Ag Enhancement Fund, I believe, is also to help farmers with equipment and other types of expenses of running a farm. And it's to help them to make sure that they stay successful in Tennessee.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Lady Moody.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, and your staff, all the people in your department for your hard work. My question goes to page 20, and it goes to the DCS and I'm in particular interested in the Wilder facility also. And do you know, will this include an increase in the beds at these facilities? Do you have that information?
I don't remember. Well, why don't we get back to you with that? I don't remember offhand in the meetings whether an increase in beds or not
Okay.
at the Wilder facility.
We, in West Tennessee, I know we hear from our judges and law enforcement. It's what we're woefully under, what you call it? We don't have enough beds.
That's right. Right.
And it's just a drain on our law enforcement. And, so yes, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Be glad to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on the ag enhancement grants, have there been an increase for farmers for this year and past 2 or 3 years, or is it pretty much leveling out for the last 3 or 4 years?
Okay, the notes that I have here say that basically that this is a $5 million cost increase in the ag enhancements grants added to so that the new base funding will be $31.5 million.
So there has been an increase.
It adds to it.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I know the price of everything is so high now, equipment and everything else. I wondered if farmers was getting a little extra help with that.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Next on the list is Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the hour's getting late, so I won't belabor. A lot of folks have been over slide 16, which I really like. It's an incredibly good graphic. I'll relate to Lady Camper that if you look up House Bill 969, you'll see a way to make that $1 billion recurring. So that's all I've got, Mr. Chairman. And thank you.
Thank you,
There's a
Chairman.
reason.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Commissioner and team, for being here. I've got just a couple of questions, and there's been a lot of talk. Can y'all hear me okay? I feel like I can't hear myself, so we're good. We've talked a lot about bonds for this, and I was curious, as a state, what's our total bond obligation that we have today on our balance sheet? And then what is the total debt service that we have on our total bond obligation as we sit here today?
So if you look at the comptroller's report, the comptroller reports that there's $7.5 billion in total bonds. But let me break that down because that sounds like a lot more than we really have. Because if you look at general obligation bonds, which are the bonds that we usually think of as state bonds, those are $1.7 billion. But because the comptroller counts THDA bonds, it's 3.6, almost 3.7 billion in that. The comptroller also counted the other big lick on that is state school bond authority bonds, which is another 1.7. So so that's kind of the way. There's some more, but there's a comptroller report, and those are the big ones on here because it's a lot more than what you would think. But it's because those other entities are included. I think our total is this.
So in the document on page A122, kind of highlights the debt service. And for the current year, FY25 that we're in now, it's debt service for GO bonds is $359 million.
And when you say GO bond, I'm curious, I'm making sure that's our total bond obligation of $7.5 billion that we're asking Tennessee's to pay every year is that number.
That is tax funded debt.
Right. But that's the total obligation for that to pay those bonds is the 300 and what million?
359 for FY25.
All right. And then thank you for that. And then one follow-up, I'm looking at your budget overview page here. Let me get to I think page 5. And I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly, that Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all is unappropriated budget surplus. So as of this, we've got just under 2.7 as a budget surplus with appropriations of about $500 million with a total available funds on June 30th of 2025 of just over $2.1 billion. Am I reading that correctly? That there's a budget surplus of $2.1 billion from last year? Or this available June 30th of this year?
You want to explain that? Because he's telling me. Go ahead, Alex. Say your name. I'd like to ask Alex Schuman to respond, please. If he can get a mic. Here, use this.
Okay. Alex Schuman, the Assistant Director. Representative, the page you're looking at is about fiscal 25. So Roman numeral 3 is the total surplus at the end of fiscal 24. We've got recommended supplemental appropriations of about $500,000. A lot of that is from special session. So we're projecting at the end of the current fiscal year, 2.1 billion.
Okay. Thank you. So that answers my question to a degree. Couple of things. You're asking us to incur additional bond debt of $1 billion, and we've got over $2 billion available for that. So I'm curious. That just made me curious to think, what do we use this money for during this budget appropriation? How's that appropriated? Since it's money left over, what do we do with it? Why do we need to bond it when we got the money to pay the $1 billion?
Is that at the end of this year? That's all the non-recurring. I think I've got to kind of make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying, because they're telling me it's non-recurring, but it's.
That's the number, and then it funds all of this.
Oh, so this is before all of our expenses.
Well, this is a surplus, so yeah, it's obviously not recurring.
It's the revenue. It's the revenue before we fund all of our expenses for the fiscal year.
So, I guess I would, so the balance we're talking about is kind of our starting balance for building the 26 budget. And so I would point out to the overview that we have here that tried to itemize the different things on the non-recurring side that we're using those dollars for, which is funded from the 2 billion that you pointed out. The big one being highway fund transfer of $1 billion. And you can see the others that the conservation agenda picks up some 228 of that, and kind of you can see the different items that are there, but those are the big rocks.
So the bottom line is this has already been allocated for
Correct.
25, 26 budgeted process.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted to clarify, that we're not sitting here, that we're asking Tennesseans to incur additional bond debt, which makes me nervous. So that's what I want to make sure.
Makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Representative Miller.
Am I live? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all. Just one question. Slide 4, for my better understanding and clarifications on the F&E taxes of $973 million. What is our current relationship with F&E taxes going forward?
When you say our current relationship,
will we collect any F&E taxes going forward?
Yeah, we will continue to collect F&E taxes as we go forward. It's about usually between 15 and 20% of our total state revenue.
Well, I guess my follow-up question is, the reason that we paid out $973 million, because the governor and I guess our attorney general decided that we had been collecting taxes that we should not have been collecting.
Oh, okay. You're talking about the F&E taxes that we had to deal, the issue that we had to deal with last year, with that we used the 973 to help fund. That's correct. So last year, as you remember, we put aside about $1.5 billion to cover the F&E tax refunds that we needed to cover because of the issue that we ran into. So that money was because we had the $973 million that rolled of recurring revenues that rolled over from the previous year, that was able to help us fund that $1.5 billion. Now that, I think what you're asking is what's the status of that 1.5 billion? And the status today is that we have given out refunds of about around 1.3 billion roughly. And then we extended the deadline for some of those businesses in East Tennessee because of the disaster and all there. So we're still not closing that yet because of that extended deadline, but we still anticipate having about $113 million left over that we've rolled into this budget from the 1.5 billion that we allocated to F&E taxes last year.
Okay, so moving forward, we will collect at least 20% of our total budget.
Between 15 and 20% in
Moving
F&E taxes.
forward in F&E
That should be
taxes.
correct.
And once we collect those, will we have a better understanding that we will not be sued based on going forward?
Yes, but yes, that is true. But I will also tell you, 4 years ago, I would have also said, yes, that is true. So we do not expect to be sued. We have put that issue to bed. So that issue has been taken care of. And to answer your question, that issue we do not expect to be sued on because we have taken care of it and we do not expect any issues there.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Representative Hicks of Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. And this is something that you can actually get back to me if you need to on, but it relates to dental care in TennCare. And I think that the TennCare had requested about $19 million in order to try to fund dental care in a better way. And I think there was around $9 million that was actually funded in this budget. So there's a lot of concerns around that. And I think that, it would be nice to be able to put more money towards dental care because it's been struggling in TennCare for a while. So I think that's an important issue that, so if you could just speak on that or you can get back with me, either one. Thank you.
Why don't we get back to you since it involves us and TennCare, budget and TennCare. I want to talk to you in more detail about that. I know it is something that we have been trying to focus on because it is important to health, but it's not always covered by some of the insurance policies and those types of things. Yep.
All right. Thank you. Members, that's the final person that was on my list. So I do want to thank the department. I know this has been a long time coming, this budget process. I do want to thank Commissioner, you and your staff for all the hard work that's been put into this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that.
All right, members, we are going to transition over to the district attorney's conference. So if they want to be making their way up, and we'll let the transition begin. I do want to make one quick announcement. It was mentioned about education and Representative Love. They will be coming before us, the department, March the 10th at 8 a.m. So they will be coming. All right, we will go ahead and get started. We'd like to welcome our guests from the DA's conference, and we'll let you begin. Please begin with the introductions, and then you can dive right into your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee. First, if we could, I think they have the wrong PowerPoint up. we love the public defenders, but I'd prefer not to switch budgets with them. My name is Stephen Crump. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee District Attorneys General Conference, and I'm joined today to my right by Deputy Director Mike Donovan, who is the Deputy Director for Legal Services and Policy, and joined on my left by Mike Huffaker, who is our Chief Fiscal Officer, our Director of Fiscal Services. We usually come before you with a list of things that we are hopeful of convincing you or the administration in the amended budget that we are in need of. This year, I can gratefully tell you that that list is going to be exceedingly small. If we could move to the next slide. Or do we have that? No, is this us? Sorry, my first time with your new system. The list you see up there represent the items that we asked the governor's office for as part of our budget request. You will see that we asked for our usual statutory service and experience credits. These are fundings for statutory step raises for assistant DAs and criminal investigators. Those were fully funded by the governor's budget, and so we will not be asking for any additional. Likewise, the second item, which is $100,000 in hardware acquisitions to go with the technology we use in the office, that was also granted. As you all may or may not know, the cost to place an office in Tennessee has skyrocketed over the last 8 years. And as we have tried to find new space or additional space for our offices around the state, we have encountered incredible increases in rental rates. And that's not just in the large cities, that's also in the small towns. We are currently seeing rental prices for offices in Columbia, Tennessee, that rival those here in downtown Nashville. And it's not a question of anything other than there is a fairly small amount of office space that is currently available in a lot of these areas. In the next item, which is a child support increase, we had several years ago, we had a number of our employees who were significantly below the level for which they qualified as a matter of their years of service. Last year, through the governor's budget and through the Department of Human Services, we're able to alleviate a lot of those problems. This $1.5 million that you see up here would have brought every employee to within 5 levels of where they should be, and everybody at least up to their current level. So we did not get that full amount from the governor's budget. However, we did get an amount that we can continue to attack that problem. And we're hopeful and believe that we will be in a position to actually achieve getting everybody where they're supposed to be within the near future. We did not receive another adjustment for salaries for criminal investigators. As you well know, salaries for state employed law enforcement officers have increased dramatically. We were fortunate enough a couple of years ago to get a first level of increase, and shortly after that, both the Tennessee Highway Patrol and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation increased salaries dramatically in both of their agencies pursuant to a workload and pay study that they had performed. Our ask there was simply to bring these more in line, our investigators more in line with those. We'll continue to talk with the administration about that, and we will also look if that's something that potentially we can self-fund through equity at the end of our budget year. The last item that we did receive from the administration is the $95,000 for training. As you know, a couple of years ago, this body passed and the governor signed a bill which required us to name one prosecutor in each district as the chief child abuse prosecutor or child sex abuse prosecutor in that district, and also to provide training. However, that same bill said that no state funds could be used absent a specific appropriation. So the training component of this, we've not been able to accomplish. However, we will be able to accomplish it with the funds that have been given. And so we look forward to being able to fulfill all of our obligations under that statute. And lastly, we'd asked for a health and wellness stipend to to supplement what we're paying in the conference. Really, that's something we can handle within our own budget. But we thought it was important for both our members and for the outside community to see that we take the wellness of our employees seriously as well. And we believe that mental health and physical health are something that lawyers in particular tend to downplay and tend not to make to take care of. And so one of the things that you'll see from us over the next few years is a real emphasis, as you're seeing from the National District Attorneys Association and the American Bar Association, on the health of lawyers and the people who work in their communities. The vicarious trauma that both lawyers and the members of the DA's staff see on a daily basis and incur on a daily basis is significant. And so we're hopeful to be able to address that more fully in the years to come. So in reality, the only thing that we are going to be talking more with the administration about and with you all about really comes down to our position ask. This last year, we asked for a total of about 117 positions. The way we arrived at those positions, we surveyed each individual district, and we asked the district attorney in that district to tell us what your needs are. For many years, this conference came to this body and to the administration and said, we would like 31 assistant DAs and so many secretaries and so many assistant victim witness coordinators. Because after the last workload study that we performed, we were so far behind that 31 was such a small number compared to the number that had been reported we were behind, that we thought that number was sufficient. We felt like it was more important to give you real data about what the real needs were, because it's been a long time since there's been a workload study of the DA's conference. And so that's what the numbers that you see up there represent. They represent the combined and compiled numbers for all 32 of Tennessee's DAs for the positions which they believe are essential to continue the work or to expand the work to more fully serve the citizens of their districts in Tennessee. I will say this, we were fortunate last year related to some immigration legislation that you passed that we received a research division. We will be conducting our own workload study based upon the same models that are used by the Tennessee State Court Center, or by the State Court Center rather, and also following the models that have been used by both North Carolina and Alabama most recently to determine what the average weighted caseload would be within each judicial district. With that, I've put up here some quotes from some of the DAs about why, and this comes from the survey. We asked them to specifically justify, not just to say, I want 2 of this and I want 1 of that and I want 2 of this, to say specifically what the purposes were. And this is just a sampling of that. If any of you would like it, we'll be more than happy to provide you with all 32 districts' recommendations and also requests and their justifications for that. It's an immense honor to represent Tennessee's prosecutors. As a former elected prosecutor, I consider myself very fortunate to have had the opportunity to represent the citizens of my home community in that particular way. And I think it's a unique honor to be able to stand in the well of a courtroom and say, my name is Stephen Crump, and I represent the people of the state of Tennessee. It's my honor to do that. It's also my honor to appear in front of you. I want to thank Governor Lee specifically for his generosity in this budget to us. We appreciate him listening to us, and we appreciate him taking into account our needs. And we certainly, as always, do the same with you. We're very appreciative of all of you. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions you all may have.
All right. Thank you, Director Crump, and thank you for your presentation. Members, we're going to open it back up to any questions and discussion. We're going to begin with Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, General. Specifically, thank you for collectively what you all do for keeping us safe in the state. It's something that's very important to this committee and important to every single Tennessean. I know that in FY 22-23, the DA's conference received over $6 million in recurring state funding for 70 positions, including 32 assistant district attorney positions and 24 victim witness coordinators, 5 investigators, and 9 secretaries. And I know you're making a similar ask this year. The DAs were further authorized to use salary equity to establish an additional 34 positions. So here's my question. To date, how many of these positions have been filled? And then Chairman, I have a couple more after that. Go ahead, General.
We currently, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, you're recognized. Go right ahead.
We have roughly 1,300 positions statewide. We currently have 32 that are unfilled.
So from the equity there, where we permitted 34 to be filled with equity, there's still 32 that are unfilled.
No, they were all filled. Those are, I can't tell you which of those sitting here today, they were all filled and hired by September 1 of the year that you gave them to us. Some of them are now empty because people have gone to other spots or they've moved or whatever. But out of our 1,300, we right now we currently have 32. But that's down from 74, I believe, just 3 years ago.
And do you know out of that salary equity fund, how much is left in that?
We are anticipating recurring salary equity of approximately $1.3 million at the end of this budget year.
Okay. And is that something I know we've granted in the past the ability to be able to utilize that and give you all the freedom to be able to utilize that for additional positions and or pay flexibility there? Is that something that you would potentially be pursuing again?
Yes, Leader, we certainly would welcome the opportunity to explore how many of those positions and what the Department of Finance Administration would be willing to allow us to do.
And the last one here, and this one's tough because, I mean, having done the job for 7 years, working for General Ray Whitley, who I know is the dean of the conference, longest serving district attorney, and quite frankly, in my humble opinion, one of the finest prosecutors that ever graced a courtroom. But is there an estimate of what the caseload is per assistant district attorney and then how that compares to other states? Have we been able, I know that that's a rabbit we've chased for many years. Do we know that information?
Thank you, Leader. That question is hard because people count cases differently, even from jurisdiction to jurisdiction within the state of Tennessee. When I first became legislative chair, which would have been 2015, I'm sorry, our caseload was about 1,600 cases per lawyer, and that includes both general sessions and criminal court. That's steadily declined over the years. My suspicion is that it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood when we do the 24 numbers, when we're able to get the 24 numbers completed. My anticipation is that's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of between 1,000 and 1,100.
And members, I just want to let that sink in for a moment. I mean, these are people's lives we're dealing with. It's people that are innocent until proven guilty, but it's also a vast number of victims and individuals in the community that have been affected by the justice system. And over 1,000 cases per DA is a lot. So thank you for the job that you do. And I appreciate you continuing to try to get more resources to do the job well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Garrett. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, thank you all for being here. We appreciate everything that you all do. My question revolves around, I think we mentioned it in the budget hearing before you, the Victim of Crime Act Victims Fund. I mean, we know that fund has been decreasing over the years, and we know that you all rely on some of those funds. And, you know, I think specifically you all fund 45 specially trained victim witnesses coordinators with those funds. So my question relates around, well, the impact really of what that decrease in funding does. So what do you typically receive in a given year? And then how have you prepared for these decreases going forward? Should they continue? Then I've got one follow-up after that. So
thank you. Determining how much is actually received, a lot of these are county administered grants as opposed to where they actually administer the grants to receive the funds. But you're correct. We do have 45 assistant victim witness coordinators employed, and also a number of stop grant prosecutors that are funded the same way. What you're probably looking at in those assistant victim witness coordinator positions is roughly 1/3 of our victim witness workforce. Now we took salary equity last year and moved 8 of those off of grants. My goal as director was to move us off of every federal grant before I left. The only one I think we probably will never kind of get away from is the DUI grant. It's too important, and frankly, it's one that it would be difficult for us to make a decision to do otherwise. But the rest of them, we would like to eventually move all of those to state positions so that those positions don't ever fall into that orbit of the federal budget that can suck them in and we never see them again.
So I think you kind of alluded to my next, I got kind of 2 follow-ups. You alluded to my next one is that what operations would most be affected if this program or this grant ended? And then would your current workload be able to provide, you know, those services if this grant money is gone? You kind of alluded to that, but if you could expand on that.
Sure. We did a study when we first started pursuing getting off of the VOCA grants and pursuing, asking the state to pick some of these up. And we estimated that well over 10,000 victims across the state were served by these individual assistant victim witness coordinators. Right now, we have, not every district has a victim witness coordinator for every court. And not every court has one that's needed. But there's still a remarkable shortfall because a lot of what happens with particularly victim witness, it's not so much that they're there to count a case or to keep track of what's happening. It's frankly sitting there in a room with the victim of crime or with the surviving parent of someone who's died or someone else and being a hand, being a shoulder and someone who will listen. That can't be accomplished through technology, and it can't be accomplished any other way than by actual physical people. We have been very active in the technology space, taking a lot of the extra money that we have and pouring it into things like Axon so that our lawyers have the ability to edit videos on their desk without having to go out and have somebody else do it or hire somebody to do it. And the same thing is, but that's something that we can use a machine to do. We can't leverage technology to actually be in a courtroom with a crime victim or at their home or meeting with them in the office. That's something that physically they have to do. And frankly, we don't have enough lawyers to pick up that slack. I mean, we're nowhere close to that.
Director Generals, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all my questions. I appreciate the time.
All right, thank you very much. Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, guys. I truly appreciate everything that you're doing. I just got a couple of questions. Back on the personnel needs, that number, are those numbers in the 32 vacancies that you have now, are they reflected in those numbers as well, or is this is a totally different ask and in addition?
That's correct.
Okay.
And several years ago, we had a number of positions that we abolished because they were ghost positions, if you will. They were related to grants that no longer were funded, or they were related to local funding that was no longer available. All these that you see up here are new asks in addition to those 32 across the state.
Okay, thank you. Can I continue, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I said, Mr. Chair, and a bunch of people back there responded to it. So that I think that total is somewhere in 8 million. Somewhere. Do we have it? What is the total for that?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
I do believe that it was roughly $7.5 million.
$7.5 million, and we're requesting that in the budget today, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, and if you, Mr. Chair, thank you for your indulgence. If we can go back to the child support slide.
And if I could say one thing, sure. Actually the administration did fund 10 new assistant DA positions in the budget. I should have mentioned that earlier. So out of that number, only 20 will still be out there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And thank you, sir. And that 1.6 million for child support, can you break that down just a little further for me?
Sure. Our child support employees are paid on pay scales that are graduated, and you obtain a higher pay based upon your years of service to the office. When I became director, we had an employee that was 19 pay grades below where they were supposed to be. I thought that was just not acceptable for the state of Tennessee. And so I made it a priority to ask. Our initial ask was to get everybody to within 9 levels because, frankly, I didn't think we could make enough dent in it. I didn't think we would ever be awarded enough money to bring everybody up to where they should be. So I wanted to attack it over a multi-year plan. So we did that. We accomplished that. The Department of Human Services, we had a budget amendment that allowed us to do that. And so now everybody is within 9 years. But if we don't move up again, that 9 will become 10. And the same creep will happen again. And so that represents child support specialists, child support investigators, and also child support administrators. And there are 21 districts across the state that have those. The other 11 districts are maintained by private entities, but the 21 that we have, that's what that number represents. And that number would take everybody up to where they were no more than 5 levels behind where they should be.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me preface this question by saying it may not necessarily be appropriate, but I'm going ahead with it anyway. Slide 2, and you're already there.
Okay.
But the district attorney generals are elected for each of the state's 32 judicial districts to serve an 8-year term. And the responsibility of the executive director, Director Cron, is to provide administrative support to all of the districts, include multi-district prosecution, coordination, other assistance, provisions of continuing education, budgeting, accounting. So I sort of look at these DAs as our DAs as your DAs. So I'm trying to figure out how to ask a budgetary question in reference to one of our DAs is being threatened to be ousted out of office. And I'm trying to understand, in your experience, in all the years you've been executive director, you know of any case of any DA that's being threatened? I know it's not a budgetary, but I'm gonna get there. Well, of course it's not a budgetary,
Okay,
but I'm getting there.
Yeah, let's get there real quick.
In your experience, short of a criminal act, yeah, I'm just.
Representative, I will say this. I am aware of 3 circumstances under which DAs, short of a criminal offense, were the subject at least of an investigation in the General Assembly. I want to be extremely careful here because the DAs across this state every day are required to make very difficult decisions, many times that the people who elected them don't agree with. I did that as an elected DA. I did that as an assistant DA. Occasionally, it got me called to the principal's office as an assistant DA, but I made the decisions and I stood by them. I think that the situation you're referring to is one of incredible interest to the people of Shelby County. And because of the pending legislation and because of my respect for the office of the district attorney in the 30th Judicial District, as well as the other 31, I don't think that I should respond to questions that have not been placed before committee yet and that have not been voted on by this legislature. The last thing I want to do as the director of this conference is to say something that gives energy to something that might end up in the removal of one of my members. But by the same token, I always want to be open and candid with this body. And you can count on honesty and candor from us in this circumstance like every other one. But for me to comment on this, I think would be entirely inappropriate, both out of respect to the 30th, but also to the other 31 that I represent here today.
All
Thank
right,
you,
fair
sir.
enough. Let's move. Representative Miller, you got another question?
No, thank you, sir.
Budgetary, okay. All right, that is the last member that is on my list. So, Director, thank you. Thank you for your presentation and your staff. Certainly appreciate all you gentlemen being here today.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to transition to the District Public Defenders Conference. So we will ask Mr. Frogue to please, Director Frogue, please move this way, and you may begin when you are ready, and please just introduce those that are with you there at the table.
right.
Actually, Director, before you begin, as you all get your presentation, I'm going to take a personal privilege right quick, and I'm going to ask our third judicial public defender, Mr. Todd Estep, if he would please stand up and be recognized. Thank you for being here. That's Hawkins, Hamlin, Hancock, and Greene County, so thank you. All right, you are recognized.
Thank you. My name's Patrick. Is this on? It is. My name's Patrick Frogue. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee District Public Defenders Conference. To my right is Chelsea Curtis. She's my deputy. To my left is Sherry Isom. She's our fiscal director. I have a clicker. So I typically start here because I think our budget, as opposed to a lot of state budgets, is very, very simple. It consists mostly of people and the ancillary costs that they have. If you look at our base budget request, it includes mostly payroll and benefits, and then a smaller number for what those people need to work: office supplies, real estate, computers, travel money, et cetera. We're a little bit different than the district attorneys. We're set up statutorily. We mirror the district attorney's structure in that there are elected public defenders for each judicial district. The exception for that is Davidson County and Shelby County. Those offices had public defenders when we started in 1989. So they're managed by their counties. They're members of the conference, but the money that flows to their office is like a block grant. It's set by statute and it gets adjusted by CPI every year. So it just passes through my office. I put this up just to show, I think, we're 91% salary and benefits. Those other two pie pieces are Davidson and Shelby, but those could be figured separately, frankly. We don't have any, I can't tell them that they're going to get less money or more money. I don't tell them how many positions they have or how to spend it. It just literally passes through. They're mostly funded by their counties and their employees are county employees. With regard to the requests, we also put this together by last Friday, which was before the governor's budget was released. So I'll address that in a minute. Basically, the first two are what are statutorily required. Our statutory salary step raise. That's so we can move all of our attorneys up one at the end of the year if they're still here, and all of our investigators. And then Shelby and Davidson County, that number is fiction. It's a guess that gets figured at the end of the fiscal year by CPI. We base that on what we did last year, but CPI is a moving target based on the economy. So we'll see. So that's really sort of a placeholder. With regard to the other requests, I'll take first is the Shelby County equitable pay adjustment. The public defender in Shelby County came to me about 2 years ago and pointed out something I wasn't aware of. They were the only public defenders in Tennessee that weren't making the same as everybody else because they're county managed. So we had a pretty big request in last year's budget. Well, the county filled most of that. So it was not allocated from the state. The county filled it, but they left a hole where for, I think, about 24 hours, they had the same pay as everybody else. And then when the state employees got a cost of living raise, they had no money to do that. So they asked me to include this in our budget request, and I gladly did it. I think that, one of the things we've been able to do in this state that I'm proud of is pay equity between the DAs and the public defenders. When you have that, it leads to a healthier system. In states that don't have that, if the DAs are making more somewhere like they are in Shelby County right now, as soon as a public defender reaches a certain level of experience, they're trying to get out and go to the DA's conference. And that's what we're trying to avoid with that. We also asked for money and it was allocated for the Justice Text platform. I think the DAs mentioned Axon. This is just a corollary to that. It is an AI product that allows our assistants to not use as much lawyer time to review body cams and dash cams. So it allows us to just synthesize a whole lot of information, find clips, get transcriptions in real time. It's really good. It's a good product. We tested it for several months before we did it. I know Nashville tested it for a while and ultimately went with it. I saved for last our positions. We had requested a bunch of positions. We always do. And I think like the DAs just mentioned, I think if I'm in your shoes, I kind of want to know what's the end game? You know, how do we measure workload, et cetera? And the problem is when I give you a case number, whether it's 1,100 per lawyer or whatever, it doesn't tell you much unless I tell you what kind of cases those are. You know, if you were to look at a chart of cases, you would see at the very bottom, very small crimes, driving on a suspended license, simple possession, paraphernalia. And at the very tippy top of the pyramid, which is a lot rarer, would be capital murder. And so if you're saying we do 50 or 1,000 cases a year, you have to know what kind of cases we're doing. Up until 2007, the comptroller was charged with, and is statutorily still charged with, providing a weighted caseload study. But they stopped doing it in 2007 because they couldn't do it. I mean, frankly, the state doesn't have the data. They have circuit court data. They don't have general sessions data. And I know the AOC's been working on that for years to get that up to speed. But so the comptroller didn't have funding to do the study, and they couldn't do it with the data. So we're in a position now where we, as a result of money you all appropriated several years ago for a case management system, we have our data. We can tell you exactly how many cases each individual lawyer works and what type they are. But that doesn't tell you a lot unless you know what's the standard. And most people don't walk around knowing how many murder cases in a year should you do? How many driver's license or DUIs should you do? And luckily, other states have done a lot of these studies for us. So what I set out to do before our budget request in the fall was to take our numbers, that is our lawyers, and say, okay, just for argument's sake, if each lawyer has 2,000 hours a year to spend, how many cases should we do? And then I went and looked at how all the other states had weighted those crimes, because they're all different. Some states say a capital murder case should take 200 hours. Some say 1,200 hours. And so I went through with our case data and with our employee count, and I used those case studies to show where we are. Okay, this is based on all those states. That top one was last year. It was by the RAND Corporation and the National Association of Public Defense. That's a high number. It says we're 428 lawyers short. The one that got close to making me feel good for a minute was Maryland, which said we were only 29 lawyers short. But when I looked at how they weight cases, they said that a murder case should be 100 hours, but a capital murder case should be 1,200 hours. So I can't really square their weights. The average of all these say that we're about 100 lawyers short, right? And so I've come here every year and asked for a lot of positions. And you all have responded. Lots of years we've gotten positions. We've had sustained incremental growth over the years. Last year was an exception. We didn't grow. But you all did appropriate a pay raise for our assistants and our electeds over the last 2 years. So we thank you for that. But that's why we're coming here. I think, like the DAs, we'll be able to show you a weighted caseload study because we have data on every single one of our cases. I can show you how many cases we do. And it does vary by district. You know, we have a judicial district. We have a small judicial district that's 1 county. We have a judicial district that runs from Kentucky to Alabama. That's 5 counties. So we have lots of different unique challenges in each district, but I can show you district by district what we need. We've done the same survey that the DAs talked about. When I go through and ask the public defenders to tell me what they need, I think I came up with about 85 lawyers most recently. I think they need more than that, but I'm not elected in those positions, so they get to tell me. But that's why I came forward this year. I think I asked for 24 assistants, 12 investigators, 20 secretaries, and 7 social workers. The one thing we have been able to do that I think falls outside what you might think of our traditional mission statement is we started about 6 years ago with a grant that helped us fund 3 social worker positions. And we moved that grant and we're able to grow it through the Department of Justice. It's actually a law enforcement grant. And so now we've got public defenders state funded in something like 16 districts, and we've got grant funded in 5. So we've grown that program. And I think one of the reasons we've done it is when you go to a district that has a social worker, it's not just us saying they're a good thing. The DAs typically think it's a good thing. The judges think it's a good thing because we're able to sort of step outside of our normal zone of courtroom defense and address some underlying problems, connect people to resources, help people to stop becoming repeat customers. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you very much. We do have some folks on the list here. We will begin with Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for, sorry, I always have to forget to look at the live. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you and all the hard work you're doing for Tennesseans. I was just listening to your presentation, and I'm struck by the fact is you seem a little more stressed about the actual issue surrounding the number of positions than I've recognized in the past. And so I can appreciate the challenge before you, particularly with the hours and what we're going to find from the case study. But you mentioned earlier about the 43 positions you got in 2023, that was $4.8 million recurring. Was that through the grants that you just talked about, or was that the last time we gave you additional positions?
So those 43 positions, if I'm correct, I think those were over the two fiscal years, fiscal maybe 22 and fiscal 23.
Correct.
So it was like 21 and 22 positions. So we would have got, those were state appropriations. That was an increase in the budget.
Okay. Of those 43 positions, how many are currently open?
We don't keep open positions. If there are any of those open right now, it's because somebody quit and we're hiring somebody. So
yeah.
We have that, the churn, we keep a normal, in an agency this size, we keep a normal churn where there are some open positions at any given time, but we fill every position you give us.
So if, to use a different vernacular, I would say, are there any vacancies there, or your description of open and vacant are the same?
There are no vacancies. We do have, I think, either 11 or 15, I can't remember the number, vacant positions that aren't actually positions. They're revenue funded.
Okay.
There's a statute that allows districts to impose a local tax, for lack of a better word, of $12.50, and that sometimes can fund positions.
Mm-hmm.
But in COVID, a lot of those collections went off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have positions that are unfilled, but they're revenue funded. If there's revenue for a position, I'll fund it pretty quickly.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. This has to do with county revenue funding. The 2024-25 budget authorized you to establish one new position to be funded with county revenues. Is this county revenue source alone sufficient to fund this new position? And I have a couple more questions.
Sure. So I think the position you're talking about was a position we sought an expansion. Montgomery County reached out to us and said, hey, we'll fund a position. I think they're funding a DA's position as well. And we sought expansion to be able to fund that. We are funding that position. It's filled. We have not been able to accept the county money. As I understand, the expansion's been signed off on yet, but it has not been added to the work program by FNA at this point. So I think we're going to have to wait until July 21 to get that added to the work program and actually accept the money. But we're funding it out of payroll savings right this minute, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So currently the funding from the county is not a reliable source. You are funding it yourself, but the position is filled, correct?
Yes, sir. And I think the county funding seems very reliable. We just don't have permission to accept it until we get signed off on in the work program. But I think the county's done their part. I think what happened is we're sort of stuck in the paperwork right this minute to accept the money.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Chairman Holsey, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you. I don't think I've been here long enough to have an intelligent question, but I just want to make a comment. And that is, I'm sure you know this, but one of the best teams you got up in Sullivan County. I want you to know how much I appreciate them. They're really good folks.
They're good folks. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to you and your team. Appreciate everything that you do. The difference or the ratio of prosecutors to public defenders, what is it?
I don't know off the top of my head the ratio. they're a larger organization. They do more stuff than us. They do they have a huge child support division. So I don't know what the ratio is. I can tell you the ratio of cases in 2017, the Supreme Court had the Indigent Representation Task Force, and they asked me point blank, what percentage of cases do you all represent? And when I couldn't figure out sessions because there was no data at that time. But for circuit, I figured out we were doing about 50%, and I was able to pull our cases and compare them to the AOC's caseload. More recently, I was speaking with someone at the AOC who directs their indigent services. He's just done a comparison and said we're more like 70% right now. So I don't know what the personnel difference is. I can tell you the caseload, it depends on jurisdiction. There are jurisdictions where we're doing 95%. And then there are jurisdictions where we're doing something less, but we're doing, we're really the go-to solution for indigent defense in most districts.
Right. And is there, so I'm clear, there's no weighted caseload study taking place right now or planned, or am I incorrect in it?
Well, there's no, as I understand it, there's a letter, I think it's on the AOC website from the comptroller saying why they had to stop doing it in 2007. We're sort of engaging in it right now, and I know the DAs are working on their own. I think that the comptroller has done one for the judiciary, but for the DAs and the public defenders, I don't think there's been one, which is why both agencies are responding and trying to do it ourselves.
So there are concepts of a caseload study.
No, that's
okay.
one way to put it.
Right. Okay. And so let me end right there. But I think this is vital. It's important that, if we can fund other studies and different things, we should be able to fund that caseload study and make that happen and see, how we need to be, adjusting these things as we move forward. So I appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director Froke. I have no one else on the list. So thank you for your presentation today. Thank you and your staff for being here.
Thank you.
All right. We will transition on to the administrative office of the court, and we'll ask Director Long and her staff to please make their way up to the table. And Director Long, whenever you are ready, you may begin.
Am I on? Okay, great. So I know I am the only thing standing between you and adjourning.
I wasn't going to say that, but since you mentioned it.
So I will try to move through this quickly and stay on my agenda here. So first, thank you on behalf of the Tennessee Supreme Court and the court system. We appreciate the opportunity to present the FY26 court system cost increase request. I am joined at the table by Dalton Hensley, who is our fiscal director, and Joe Bird, who is our lead attorney for the indigent representation team. We are, about this time last year, you elevated to the Tennessee Supreme Court Justice Mary Wagner. I just want to say thank you for that confirmation. The picture depicts our current court, and we are delighted to have each and every one of them. You want to do that for me? So on the next slide, we were offered the opportunity to talk about some court initiatives, some of our major initiatives across the court system. And so I will try to walk through these three items here: judicial safety and security, court system technology, and a new plan for the Indigent Representation Fund. On the next slide, the judiciary is quite appreciative of the support that we have had from the legislature and the executive branches to provide funding to enhance judicial safety and security in our courthouses, particularly in light of the scenes that we've all seen on the news. Thankfully, none of those are occurring in Tennessee, and that is most likely a credit to the work that we have done. In FY24, the General Assembly appropriated $4 million for the Court Security Grant Program administered by the AOC. Those funds are available to counties as a reimbursement for projects designed to ensure courts meet the 2018 minimum court security standards. Those standards include protections for the judges and the court clerks with equipment like metal detectors in the courthouse, panic buttons, bulletproof glass, and bulletproof judicial benches, and some other things. We have worked with the counties that were missing equipment and have prioritized those applications for those counties. We have, as of today, committed all of the $4 million that was appropriated, and after the completion of those approved projects, we will have 95% of our counties in compliance with the court security minimum standards. We did provide a report on January 15th, 2025 to the legislature that provides the detail if you want to look up your particular county and see exactly where you stand. This year, we also have a legislative proposal to close a gap in current law that will enhance the protection for our judges. Currently, Tennessee Code Annotated 39-16-510 protects judges against threats of retaliation. The proposal adds to that threats that intend to intimidate, impede, or interfere or obstruct the judge in the performance of their official duties. We have judges, unfortunately, who regularly find themselves subject to threats and intimidation. This bill gives law enforcement the ability to take action earlier than an act of retaliation. So in the House, that bill number is House Bill 1353, and we would appreciate your support. On the next slide, let's talk a little bit about another major initiative, and that is court technology. So we have several projects that are in various stages of completion. The first project that you see there is Microsoft Outlook. We migrated to Microsoft Outlook from GroupWise, maybe the last agency in state government to do so, under budget and on time. We are also implementing some other tools that many of you are probably already using, like Microsoft Teams and SharePoint. We're excited in the court system to join the rest of state government with those tools. The next project is the Juvenile Courts Case Management System. Since 2022, after the passage of Public Chapter 184 and a contract that the AOC entered into with Quest Case Management System, we have been implementing a statewide juvenile case management system as required by that law. Currently, there are 63 counties using Quest. I think 49 of those counties are using the full complement that includes the case management system. We are continuing to work with court clerks, but much like the requirements of the next project I will talk about, the goal of a statewide system is truly the reliable, real-time, secure data. And in this particular project, it is paramount that that data is secure for our juvenile courts. Hopefully, we can get there with the passage of House Bill 1038 this year. Thank you, Representative Garrett and Leader Lamberth, for your sponsorship on that bill. The next technology project focuses on the requirements of Public Chapter 947 that was passed last year. It required the AOC to develop a centralized statewide court system, which includes case management, document management, e-filing, data reporting, and analytics for our trial courts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We did submit a report to the legislature on January 31st, 2025, which will provide the comprehensive update. But I would say between the juvenile case management system and the statewide court information system, The court system is moving away from siloed court information systems into single integrated systems capable of easily reporting accessible, uniform, and reliable court information across the state. We're excited about that work. It's an uphill battle in a lot of instances, but we are working very closely with our stakeholders, our court clerks and others to make sure they understand where we're going in the court system. Now, as I listened to Governor Lee last night, I am delighted that the next major initiative for the judicial branch aligns with the focus of the executive branch to think big, tackle complex problems, and be innovative. We hope it also aligns with the General Assembly. The next project is our indigent representation plan. Oh, I'm sorry, we're a slide behind. Indigent Representation Fund. We intend to do exactly what Governor Lee spoke about, to be innovative, to think big, and to solve big problems with a new plan for indigent representation. Let me say at the outset that we have not had a chance to meet with all of the members of this committee, but we intend to do so for anyone who would desire to really dig into our plan. For today, I'm just going to hit the high points so that you have an idea of the concept and what we would like to do and why. I know this particular slide is difficult to read, but the major takeaway for you is that the state is required by Constitution and state statutes to provide indigent representation for children and parents in juvenile and family matters, as well as criminal defendants, when the public defender's office cannot provide the representation due to conflicts. So while we appreciate the General Assembly support last year to increase the rates paid to the attorneys taking the private appointments when the public defender's office cannot provide the representation, we moved from $50 an hour, lowest in the country, to $60 an hour, still lowest in the country. We know from the recent comptroller's audit of the court system that the scarcity of attorneys willing to take these cases for $60 an hour still remains unresolved. We heard from legislators and leaders to be creative in our thinking and move away from requests for across-the-board increases for attorney compensation. We know from our judges that they continue to struggle to find attorneys willing to take these cases. So here's the innovative plan. First, let's identify the big problems. Lawyers are unwilling or unable to take these cases due to the low compensation that we offer. If there's no lawyer for the representation, then needless delays occur in the proceedings. If there are delays in the proceedings, that means prosecution of criminals is delayed, placement of children is delayed, they remain in foster care for far too long, and there are costs, intangible and tangible cost from those delays. DCS suffers, children suffer, our jails suffer, families and victims suffer, and the court system suffers. Very simply, here is how it works today. Judges are responsible for appointing a private attorney when the circumstances require it, and the AOC simply pays for the representation from the Indigent Representation Fund based on parameters established in Tennessee Supreme Court Rule 13. Our plan shifts this paradigm. The burden of finding an attorney to appoint will no longer be on the judge. Instead, an Office of Indigent Conflict and Civil Counsel will be established and will be responsible for making sure lawyers are available to provide representation. The office will employ attorneys, 3 per Grand Division, 1 serving as a director in that Grand Division, and 2 additional who can be full-time or part-time to be readily available to take the cases. The office will also extend its availability by strategically contracting with attorneys in the area. We can employ retainer contracts, flat fee contracts for some more simple minor cases in general sessions, quite possibly, and some hourly rate contracts where we can be flexible about the rates and the compensation that we provide based on the complexity of the cases. The key aspects of this plan are flexibility and accountability. So flexibility to determine what works in the jurisdiction. The complexity of a case. So for example, a juvenile dependency and neglect case should be treated differently in terms of how that attorney is compensated than a misdemeanor in general sessions court. The qualifications of attorneys we can monitor through this process. So a lawyer that has experience serving as a guardian ad litem should be paid more than someone who does not. So I think you're starting to get the picture that the flexibility is a key aspect of the model. We can try different strategies to determine what works best in a particular jurisdiction. So it is not a one-size-fits-all model, because what works in Sullivan County may not be what works in Sumner County. So it's geographically sensitive, as well as qualifications of the attorney and complexity of the cases sensitive. Accountability. So the Office of Indigent, Conflict, and Civil Counsel will be responsible for all the appointments, relieving the judges of the burden of dialing for lawyers, because that's literally what's happening today. The office will be accountable to manage cost, enhance the quality of the representation by providing training for attorneys, and collecting and analyzing data to measure the effectiveness of this plan and support future decision-making. Information we don't have today. For additional accountability, oversight of this new office will be provided by a commission that sits under the auspices of the Tennessee Supreme Court. The commission will be appointed by the Tennessee Supreme Court to ensure the effectiveness of this approach and address policy issues that plague us today. For example, development of policies to determine methods to verify indigency beyond the affidavit of indigency we use today, and to work with the public defender to develop methods to confirm the existence of a conflict before private appointment is made. There are multiple other benefits that we have identified, but there's very little time, and I imagine very little attention at this point of the day to go over absolutely everything. So that's why we would love to come by and talk with you. For the purpose of this hearing, we have included $17 million to implement this plan, as well as 14 new positions to create the organizational structure, employ attorneys, and begin contracting with them. We have to do something now. This plan solves the big problem. It is innovative and definitely bold. We absolutely appreciate your support. For our budget request, no, we should have. After a quick review of the governor's budget proposal, I want to first highlight and express appreciation for funding to renovate the old library and archives building, which the AOC can, when it's complete, move into and get out of private lease space in downtown Nashville. Additional funding for safe baby courts and the judge's mandated salary increase, which is estimated to be $1.7 million. There are additional court system needs, however. Of course, the $17 million to support the plan I just detailed briefly, $169,000 for two restored judicial assistant positions in the 30th Judicial District, which is Shelby County, $101,000 for a new staff attorney for the Board of Judicial Conduct, and $30,000 for the operations and maintenance of the Tennessee Justice Bus. So for the judicial assistants, we believe it was an unintended consequence of an action taken last year. We would ask to restore two positions to the 30th Judicial District. When 2 judge positions were reallocated from the 30th Judicial District to the 14th and the 19th. The judicial assistants that were tied to those positions were also moved to the 14th and the 19th. What I'm sure the legislature was unaware of is that in Shelby County, and it is the only place in the state where a judge, more than one judge, shares a judicial assistant. So when the judicial assistants were moved with one judge from the 30th, there was a judge left without a position for a judicial assistant. We're simply asking to restore those positions to the 30th Judicial District. The Board of Judicial Conduct. So under the leadership of Director Marshall Davidson, the board is requesting 1 additional attorney who can provide much-needed investigative and legal support to ensure the board can continue to execute its responsibilities in the face of increasing volume and complexity of cases. The board operates with just 2 lawyers, Director Davidson and an assistant disciplinary counsel, who perform all investigatory and legal work in all cases. Not only has the volume risen approximately 49% between 2023, where they had 406 cases, to 2024, where they had 609 cases, but the complexity has increased as well. You'll recall last year, the board conducted the first removal proceeding of a judge and in 30 years, and then they've had several suspensions and public reprimands in the board. So we are here presenting this request on their behalf, and I'm sure the board appreciates your support. The last item on our budget request is the Tennessee Justice Bus. I think I ask for something for this bus almost every year because we got the bus with grant dollars from the OCJP. Of course, those grant dollars don't cover the maintenance and operations and staffing of the bus, but we put the bus on the road in 2022 to see how effective and useful it would be to communities across Tennessee. And I'm happy to report that on average, every year, it does about 80 events providing legal assistance to communities and citizens across this state. That we partner with faith-based community organizations, churches. The public defender has joined us, legal aid. The bus will go, and I think we've come to some of your communities providing that legal assistance. When we have lawyers or legal aid, then a member of the public can actually get representation while there. We have at the AOC been subsidizing the bus for the staff and as well as operating and maintenance costs. And so we're simply asking for recurring funds to keep the bus on the road and provide some of those operating costs with a recurring request of $30,000. I think that concludes our cost increase request. But before I turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, please allow me to invite this committee to join the Tennessee Supreme Court tomorrow at an historic event. So your offices should have received this invitation. The Tennessee Supreme Court will be in session for oral arguments in the old Supreme Court chambers in the Capitol. It will mark the first time all 3 branches of government have been working in the Capitol together since 1936, when the Tennessee Supreme Court moved across the street. So please, if you have the opportunity, please come by between noon and 1:30. The governor will be offering remarks at 1:30, and then the court will proceed with oral arguments at that time. So you're all welcomed, and I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We appreciate the continued support of the General Assembly for the judicial branch, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Director Long. All right, members, we will now open the floor up for any questions or comments, and we're going to begin with Deputy Speaker Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director and team, for the thorough presentation. You had mentioned the statewide e-filing system, and you were going to provide some more information on that. But just a couple of quick questions. With our 75 million non-recurring that we appropriated a couple of years ago, I believe 15% of that had been spent. Can you speak to what the 15% accounts for?
Absolutely. So we first engaged STS as a partner here in the state, and then STS supported us to procure through a competitive process a consulting agency, which is Gartner Consulting. So we have operational costs to STS for their support of $21,000. And then we have 2 deliverables that have been provided by our consulting partners. The remainder of $311,000 has gone to Gartner. We have 2 deliverables that they provided. We're currently working on the target state design, and then a roadmap to take us from our current state to the target state with all of the steps in between. They will also provide consultation with us for the procurement of the components that we need.
Mr. Chairman, may I continue?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Are there any courts currently using the system today?
So this particular system we do not have. What we have courts using, and I want to give you a number, we have 48 courts that are currently e-filing. 48 of our trial courts, which is a total of about 196 trial courts, are currently e-filing, which is an integration with their current case management system.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, just a couple more. What are the biggest hurdles you see in terms of implementing the system, and how are we overcoming those hurdles?
So I think biggest hurdle is understanding what we are trying to achieve for the court system, and that is unified solutions that will provide the reliable information that we need. For years, more than 20 years, the AOC has supported and the legislature has supported a product that has been providing case management to the smaller rural counties, not our big 4 counties. So while that may be about a significant portion of the data, most of the data that we need to combine and standardize and bring together sits in Shelby County, Davidson County, Hamilton County, and Knox County. So that's our challenge, is to bring all of that information together in one place so we can then start to do some real analytics on the data and start to understand where we're going as a court system and where are our pain points.
Very good. Very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Chairman Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Long, thank you. You've got my mind spinning right now, I will tell you. And thank you for spending a lot of time on the Indigent Defense Representation Fund. I should say Representation Fund. I appreciate that. Talk to me a little bit about how your carryover, your budget carryover is going to affect your ask for $17 million. What does that look like? And I know some of that carryover dates back several years to the COVID days, but help us understand that as a budget committee.
So that carry forward was realized after the pandemic. So the first year post-pandemic, we were kind of surprised to see that there was excess funding in the allotment codes that provide indigent representation. We then asked, we didn't know if that would continue because in years prior to COVID, we spent every dime of indigent representation fund for claims. And oftentimes found ourselves worried whether or not we would be able to pay all of the claims that were pending. So something happened after COVID. So we started monitoring that and worked with FNA to get the ability to carry that money forward. It's not predictable enough, I guess, at this point to know whether or not we're ever going to return to the pre-COVID days. But the timing of this proposal and this plan for indigent representation could not be better, because we can use that money to help implement some activities to create this model. We wouldn't budget on it because it fluctuates from year to year, and we don't know if it's going to continue at the current level of carry forward. But we can do some contracts and some, short-term things to use that money in the plan.
Could continue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The innovations that you've spoken of today have me very excited. I appreciate that. As you're looking at grand division setups, and are you looking at retired attorneys? Are you looking at practicing attorneys? We've had some conversations. Plant that question in your mind. And let's go back to the prior budget hearing we just heard with the Public Defenders Conference and help me understand the shortcomings or perceived shortcomings in their budget compared to the Indigent Representation Fund. Is there a correlation? Can we offset one by improving the other? And those two different subjects, but if you could address those, Director Long.
So let me do the second question first. So I would not be able to respond to the public defender's request. I would imagine that everything he is asking for, they need. The Indigent Representation Fund does not come into play until that office is conflicted out. And they are not conflicted out, my understanding, just based on the inability to take a case. So I imagine their office is strained if he has a request of that nature for additional attorneys. We don't get involved unless there's been an established conflict. And then the judge will make an appointment, and after the case concludes, we will pay the attorney from the fund. The first question about retired attorneys and more senior attorneys, we absolutely are considering and hope to utilize the wisdom and knowledge and experience of some more senior attorneys. We can do that in contracts, but we believe we're going to get some lawyers that want to just mentor young lawyers just for the benefit of doing that. But the flexibility of the plan would allow us to actually pay them for that time. If they want to sit second chair with a young lawyer that's doing their first child dependency and neglect case, or with a guardian ad litem case, we believe we can utilize those resources in the bar quite effectively.
Chairman.
And I'll answer my last question. The rate, the court-appointed attorney rate, you did say we went last year from $50 to $60. So I'll answer my own question there and just, I'll take a nod of the head that is accurate, that now we're paying $60 an hour for representation.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you for being here. Appreciate your entire team and all the judges that serve us well in this state. I just wanted the $17 million that you've asked for indigent representation. When's the last time that you requested an increase in that? And I know the legislature has put some into the budget. But when's the last time you guys have actually requested and received in the base budget an increase in that fund?
So we have made a request. Successive years, I'd have to turn to Dalton to say, when was it actually included in the base budget? 2018.
So I just wanted to highlight that, members. I mean, it's been a while. And so, I mean, these are the folks, I mean, every single defendant is innocent until proven guilty. And I've bragged on the district attorneys and the public defenders quite a lot. But there's a lot of private attorneys out there that are taking cases for next to nothing. And I do feel like it is time for us to add into that fund, because but for the grace of God goes us. And not everyone out there can afford an attorney, but every single person deserves to have a passionate advocate in court for them on their behalf. And so there's a ton of these attorneys that are doing it. They're doing it under market rates. And just in my humble opinion, it's past time for us to at least honor that request. And $17 million in a over $50 billion budget now of state funds. I mean, it's just, state and federal funds, they're both. It's time. So thank y'all for the request.
Thank you for those comments. I'll take you as a passionate advocate any day.
Representative Shaw.
Oh,
Hold on one second. Go back to Chairman
On that
Lane.
note, just in case somebody tries to take that, I actually don't take court-appointed cases for the reason that I'm a part of these conversations. I've always thought it was inappropriate for me to take court-appointed cases. When I take them, it's truly just pro bono, and I'm literally doing it for that reason. But I appreciate you saying that, but I did not want anyone watching this to take any kind of,
Not intended.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and thank you, Director Long, for being here. And you do have quite big shoes to fill from just listening to all the. When we talk about expungements, you've talked about technology. Maybe this is a little unfair question, but when will we get to that point where the system will be across the board systematically, not to free someone that's guilty, but when will we find a plan that it's a 1, 2, 3 step if you qualify to be expunged? Because, that is a group of people, a lot of people who could be very productive in working and have good jobs and supporting their families, have got issues on their records, and every county has a different answer. And I realize that, there are certain things you can get expunged for and certain things you can't. But when will we, if we will ever find a system that'll just be a 1, 2, 3 step to say you can be or you cannot be? I hope that's a fair question. I'm not trying to put a burden on you. I'm just looking for answers.
So I'm not sure we have contemplated a system, an electronic system that's a 1, 2, 3, and you're expunged. It's really quite a complex matter for expungement. I do think there's some opportunity in the statute for clarification. I'm happy to come and talk with you about some of that, but that would be on the legislature to do. That might just make it a little easier to understand what's eligible for expungement and when we can have that conversation.
For the sake of time, if you would do that, I'll just drop my questioning right here and we could just set up an appointment, talk about it. Thank you.
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Grills. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be real quick here. Thank you for being here. On the Board of Judicial Conduct, there at the bottom of that slide, I guess it's on page on 10. You talk about 406 cases in 2003, and then 2024, you see 609 cases. Is that something we've seen over the past 5-10 years, that those cases are rising, or what's that indicative of?
So I will do my best to answer that. I think Director Davidson would be the best source to really dig into the data. I do know that he expressed an average increase prior to this time that was much lower. I want to say closer to 11% over the course of about 3 or 4 years average. I think, and I'm not paid to think up here, but I think there's been a lot of visibility for judicial conduct. And maybe that's what's driving it. It's also quite easy to file a complaint on their website. And everything that gets filed, they have to investigate. They have to follow up on it by statute. So I'm not sure, but I do think Marshall Davidson would be the best source to answer that. I'm just speculating.
Okay, thank you. And are you seeing this in one part of the state as a greater percentage of the complaints or the cases, or is it pretty much across the state?
So that information is not transparent to us at the AOC, but Director Davidson certainly can answer that. And I'm happy to get that answer for you and provide it to your office.
We'll talk about it later. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right. The last person on the list be Representative Sparks.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. We hosted my community, we hosted a expungement clinic, Chelsea Curtis, Frogue, and others were there. Michelle, my public defender, Joe Melton was there. Going back on the court system technology, my understanding that y'all are working on updating all this to where it goes back to Representative Shaw's question, to try to just uniform this to where it's more productive and efficient to try to help folks get the records clean so they can get a job, so they can be productive, so they can pay taxes, so they can provide for their family and whatnot. But how is that unified court system coming along?
So we are in the project at the state of signing off on the target state design, which allows us to integrate our existing case management systems across the state, which are disparate, through what's called, I'm going to get way into the weeds here and I apologize, but into what is called an integration hub that kind of transforms and synthesizes the information and data. So we don't have to wait as long as it will take to migrate those disparate systems into a single solution. So we'll be able to get some early wins to unify the data and information from different systems through an integration hub, and then a centralized data repository, which will allow us to provide some statewide data. But it will be probably 7-8 years before we get to a single solution.
Wow.
Because
7 or 8 years?
Yes, so a significant portion of our case management systems are on what we call Tensis, and that is a system, a product that is supported by the AOC. But like I said, the larger counties are not on that system, and that's where most of the court activity is occurring. And so in order to get those systems migrated into a new solution, it's going to take some time.
In other words,
Particularly
the
if we're
system's
trying to
broken?
get
Is it
historic
broken?
data.
Is the system broken, you're saying?
The system is antiquated. It's over
Antiquated.
20 years old.
And we're talking about freedom though, right? Freedom. The
Talking
subject
about-
really would be freedom, in a sense. And it's antiquated. But here's a point I want to make, if I could, Chairman. I've been trying to help a young man that got in trouble when he was 17, 18. The parole board recommended full pardon for him. I shared this with General Crump and Sharon with General Donovan. Man his family was able to adopt 4 children from the foster care, 4 children, relieve the taxpayers, help kids. Boy, we're overloaded up there. 8,000 kids in foster care. Guy turned his life around when he was 17, 18. He got caught selling drugs. He's about 40 now. Justin Bashir is his name. Now a minister. And I called him because it just seemed like the whole system was just broken, taking a long time. And I called him in December because he hadn't heard anything. I had to meet with the governor, and he said, "Dude, your time is perfect." And he just hung up from the governor, got his full pardon. But what I want to share to my conservative buddies up here and others, that 1, it's freedom. 2, this young man turned his life around, adopted 4 kids. It just doesn't seem like there's any advocates out there for it. You know, the system's broken. We're talking about freedom. I've got a book of lobbyists up there that's 96 pages thick. I don't see anybody, really lobbying for freedom to advocate for this. And this isn't a Democrat-Republican issue, but I'm glad that we're able to help this guy get his life turned around. Hopefully, maybe there's 1,000 others this guy could lobby for that could go adopt these children and touch people's lives and turn it around. But if you need a poster child, Justin Bashir is your man for this. And if anybody ever needs testimony, I'll bring this guy up here because he made a mistake at 17, 18, like I did, like all of us did at 17, 18. But many of us had advocates and we had fathers in our lives to really turn us around. Many of these people don't have fathers, which is a whole nother topic, Chairman. But anyways, I appreciate I always love your enthusiasm, love your energy up here. Just want to tell you thank you for what y'all do.
Thank you so much for
Thanks,
that. That was an expungement clinic that we brought the Justice Bus to in your community. So I appreciate that.
All right, thank you. And Leader Camper, I think you got a quick comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I just want to thank you for bringing the Justice Bus to Memphis. When I had my Stay to the Streets event, people really appreciated, being able to walk out there and talk with them and get their problem solved. So it's one of the, I think, busiest activities that we had that day was the Justice Bus. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
That's outstanding. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Members, without objection, we're going to go back into session. We're back in session. That completes our calendar for today. Just a reminder, the budget hearings will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. in House Hearing Room 3. So do we have any further business coming before the committee? Seeing none without objection, we stand adjourned. We're adjourned.